Morning, Tri-Cities. It's Friday at 9 o'clock, and I'm Karl, and it's time for Coffee with Karl. We have a great episode. I always say episode, but this isn't like TV or radio, and I say that because we've got, Mike Gonzalez, former TV news anchor. It's almost like we're on TV, but it's just a Zoom webinar. So I don't know what we call it, episode or webisode or whatever we want to call it. Yeah, something like that. But today we're going to talk about these economic development projects that are coming to fruition and are happening in Pasco. So I'll start off with Stephen, and I'll introduce Stephen McFadden, who is the Director of Economic Development and Marketing for Port of Pasco. Good morning, Stephen.
Hey, good morning, Karl. Nice to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. I like your background. Osprey Point offices of the port, beautiful view.
Yeah, it's a fantastic perk working for the Port of Pasco.
It's good to have you down here.
I have to fake my background. I'm jealous of this. So I found this background on the web, and I said they gave me the really good view here at the city of Pasco. So, but yeah, Stephen's view is unbelievable. Every time I go to his office, I'm like, wow, this is really incredible. So,
hey, I'd be happy to loan you one of these background photos as long as you leave the Port of Pasco logo in it.
Hey, I'll be glad. You got a deal.
And Mike Gonzalez, who we already talked about, but Mike's the Economic Development Manager for City Pasco. Good morning, Mike.
Good to be with you, Karl. Love these episodes that you've been doing. I just really think it shines a light on everything you guys are doing and all the great economic development functions happening. So really great idea. Absolutely love it. So glad to be here.
Oh, thanks, Mike. And I want to say for everybody that's watching us on Zoom or on Facebook, I'm always taken by wherever we go, or as we're able to meet people in person with COVID protocols. People are really complimentary of the Coffee with Karl, and I do have to give full attribution to Tracy Zhao. It was her idea. She staffs it, she produces it, she directs it, she gets our guests lined up. She really does a good job. But to get feedback, just like what you're saying, Mike, it really helps us out. It's just like hey, let's give it a shot, and they're really fun to do, and I think it's good conversations. It's really helped me, even with COVID, to meet people even virtually. So appreciate the feedback. As always, we start off with our coffee mugs, and I'm always pretty open. Like, hey, if you got a mug or you want me to give a shout out, I'm always open for free mugs. So last week I met Travis Adams from Basin Pacific. They do insurance and also benefits. And he connected with me on LinkedIn. He goes, hey, I watch Coffee with Karl. I want to give you a mug. So they really went out of their way. Like, this is a really nice Yeti mug. They put my name on the back of it, which was really cool. So I'm rocking the Basin Pacific today. Thanks, Travis and the crew at Basin Pacific. Really appreciate your support. Good Tridec members for a long, long time. And but I also have another thing I wanted to share while we're on this special Pasco episode. So the summer, our family took a vacation to Seaside. And like in a secondhand store or junk store, my son found this pin, and you probably can't see it, but it says "Keep your eye on Pasco."
Oh yeah.
And I don't know how what era it's from. If it's like the 50s or 60s or something, and it was probably by like a Chamber of Commerce or something. But it says "Keep your eye on Pasco," where roads, highways, skyways, and waterways meet. And I thought it was appropriate for our discussion this day because obviously, all the great things that you guys are working on at Pasco is great representation of all those things, why companies are continuing to choose to locate in Pasco and in the greater Tri-Cities in general. So let's go to Stephen next. What do you got for a mug for us this morning, Stephen?
Well, I'm, representing the brand today, right? So Port of Pasco coffee cup, always right here at my desk and almost always full too. So I'm a bit of a coffee hound. So I like my caffeine fix early and often.
Oh, that's awesome. You always got to ride for the brand. Mike,
well, and it's all my favorite color scheme too. I don't think they knew that when I applied for the job, but anything that's blue with a hint of Seahawks green in it works.
There you go.
Although Cougar crimson and gray is pretty good too.
You got to root for the home team.
That's right.
That's right.
I'm a diehard Miami Dolphins fan, so we've been through a lot since 1983.
Oh man,
it's been a painful road, but we're getting a little bit better. But Karl, I was sharing with Tracy, before we came on, I'm a travel mug guy, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And so I've got my travel mug from yesterday. We were kind of joking how I steal the travel mugs and my wife goes crazy every morning. Make sure you bring those travel mugs back. So the Port of Pasco had a barbecue a few Fridays ago. So I was able to, I had like 5 of my travel mugs in, and I swear it was just perfect timing, because that morning she's like, "You bring back those travel mugs." So I come home and I've got, hey, I was just at the Port of Pasco barbecue. Perfect. So this has kind of become a catch-all bag these past few days. So Stephen, thank you. It's a high quality bag, and it has allowed me to bring my travel mugs home.
We need to get you a royalty check for, carrying our brand around.
I'm telling we are really good partners. So, I thought that was a nice touch, and, but it's great to have Stephen in our corner. He's, right up the road. So, and already for me being new to the economic development space, he's been a great resource. So yeah, it truly is a partnership.
No, that's a great segue into the first part of the discussion. I was thinking about it, the 3 of us within the last, I'm the old guy of the 3 of us, right? I've been here 18 months. So why don't we just start off with what, Stephen, why don't you kick us off and tell us where you came from and your background before you came to Port of Pasco, and then talk a little bit about your role, and then we'll go to Mike, and then we'll kind of get into some of this project discussion.
It's kind of interesting. You got 2 media guys sitting here. So Mike likes to be in front of the camera. I was a photojournalist and a community newspaper publisher for about a 28-year career. Owned the newspaper up in Ritzville and Adams County. And as I transitioned out of the media work, I was involved with the creation of the Adams County Development Council. And because I believe that growth is really important to the survival and the sustainability of a community. That led to the county commissioners in Adams County inviting me to become the first director of economic development for the county. I spent about 6.5 years there. During that time, I built a great relationship with Gary Ballou, who was in this seat for the Port of Pasco. And we actually traveled jointly with the Eastern Washington Economic Development Alliance, which is something that he and I created, and invited some of our neighboring counties in, so that we were promoting on a regional basis whenever it was the right fit to do so. So I joined the Port of Pasco on November 2nd, and certainly it's been a whirlwind because of the projects. And I think we talked a little bit about it, just, the real estate market here and finding a house. It gives you a good education in what a fast growing community experiences. The one thing I want to say straight out front is one of the great early experiences I had once I came to work here was the fact that the port, the city, the county, the PUD, and TRIDAC regularly have conversations. There's a relationship, there's a synergy there, and we really all support each other. And that's, from an economic developer standpoint, you have to have that. There are opportunities for us to share one voice, and that's really powerful.
It's really well said. I totally agree. And I think that, me being new as well, that's amazing to see the partnerships, definitely on the Franklin County side of the river, but then as the whole region with their Benton County partners as well. That was really well said, Stephen. Mike, what's the Mike Gonzalez story? We already know, because and it's cool because I was similar to Stephen in economic development, kind of in a smaller community in North Idaho, but our local TV market was Spokane, so I used to watch Mike Gonzalez on the news, man. So
yeah, and that was a great community. Loved living in Spokane, and my journalism story starts all the way back in 1997 when the teleprompter was paper. So they would literally throw the papers in there, and if God forbid they got off track, So it seems like yesterday though, but I started in Columbia, Missouri, as a reporter and fill-in anchor. Really small town. Moved to Lincoln, Nebraska, and really got involved in political reporting there. My news director there said, "Hey, you are my city council reporter," and I said, "Oh, what does that mean? What's my story today? He said, no, I want you to go to City Hall every single morning, really establish relationships, and bring me a story every single day. So I look at Lincoln, Nebraska as really the place where I got my journalistic chops, because I walked in that first day and they said, what are you doing here, man? I worked at this place called 1011 News, the CBS affiliate in Lincoln. Developed the relationships with the mayor, with the city council people, boy, and I broke some stories. So that was just a great experience. From Lincoln, I spent a couple of years there as a weekend anchor and reporter, then moved over to Omaha, Nebraska for a couple of years as a morning anchor and also a morning reporter. So Omaha was a really interesting town, really metropolitan feel. No one would think that about Omaha, Nebraska, but really sophisticated town, some really larger companies there like ConAgra and some multinational companies. And I loved it because I'm a baseball guy. So, you have the College World Series there, so got to cover that. So that was a really fun market, really enjoyed it, and really kind of learned about the Midwest and the values there. From there, moved over to Spokane, Washington, where I spent close to 7 years in that market as a morning anchor initially. Then I moved over to be an evening anchor. And from there, went to Raleigh, North Carolina for a couple of years as a morning anchor. Then also got into some management as an executive producer for our weekend show and doing some management things. So really got interested in being a news director and wanted to do the management track. Then came over to, actually came back to Tri-Cities for almost 3 years as an evening anchor and news director, because I really wanted to kind of develop the management skills, which was really helpful and gave me a whole new perspective on, personnel and young journalists and the drama that can go on in a newsroom. So it was a really good experience. But wanted to get back primarily in front of the camera. So I went to Phoenix, Arizona. I was looking for kind of that next level, large market experience. And so spent a couple of years there. But I got to the point where I felt like I was ready to move out of the news business. And I think everybody gets to that point, because when you get to that larger market, you could either go to Los Angeles or, the next set of craziness. And I think as a family, I was just at the point where I really wanted to get back closer to family and wanted to get back closer to my wife's family. So we decided to start looking for public relations jobs or public affairs jobs. So the opportunity came up at Franklin PUD in January of 2020, right before the pandemic hit. And so really grateful to Scott Reese, the general manager out there. I wasn't a traditional candidate in the sense, I had some skill sets with TV, radio, writing, and, I didn't know much about the energy business, but I promised I would put my reporter hat on and learn. So, and that was just an incredible experience to learn the issues of resource adequacy, the fight with the dams. And, Scott said, hey, just do what you do, create content that's, fights for the dams, fights for our initiatives. So, and I think that's kind of what opened the door here at the city of Pasco. I've been friendly with Dave Zabel since my news days and with Cap K-View. So there was a job kind of opening up and I heard about it. I talked to a few people within the city about it, and I think they wanted to utilize that skill set of creating content to kind of reshape the image. It's interesting how all these great things going on in Pasco, but largely the perceptions from the 80s or whatever they are really persist. That was one of the goals when they said, hey, we want you to really change the narrative of what's happening here in Pasco. So I've been able to, I think, get off to a pretty good start and really showcase some of those great things that are happening. I say I put on my journalism lens and really try to do what I'm good at, which is creating content and letting people know how special Pasco is. So, and I think Stephen and I kind of share that same thought pattern as a journalist. You're always searching for answers. So it's nice to be able to talk to somebody that kind of speaks the same language. Whether you're a print journalist or you're a television journalist, you're still going after the same thing, the facts. You want to get it correct. So that's why I really like working with Stephen, because the process we kind of process things the same, because it's always, what's the question? How do we get the answers? And ultimately, how do you end up with a result? Because we always have to have a result, right, Stephen? And that's what I'm always trying to do.
I think the research background that we have too, the willingness to dig in and go look at, how's it being done somewhere else, and how can we maybe deploy good ideas here?
Yep.
I think that's just going to build an even bigger tool set.
Exactly.
That's really true. And I'll say about both of you guys, like say with the journalism background, you guys understand deadlines. I mean, like you're used to getting the paper out or meeting the broadcast deadline, and that's really important what we do. I mean, because so many different things. And it's not just the whole attraction and bringing the projects in, but then it's follow up. And Stephen, I know with the Darigold project, since you've come on board, you and the team of Port of Pasco, along with the city and the county, really came together to ultimately, take the Darigold project to this stage. So let's get into that one next. You want to give us some background and give us your perspective, talk about the project, the scope and that, Stephen?
Sure. Just back to deadlines though, that's a good thing and a bad thing, because it means that Mike and I are deadline performer. So the 11th hour is when we do our best work. Super proud to have come here and immediately hit the ground with Randy Hayden working with the Darigold team, and there is a really significant team there. What we're talking about is the single largest private industrial development project in the history of the Port of Pasco. Right now, based on the current economy, they're predicting a $500 million capital investment to construct a facility that will create dehydrated milk powder, high concentrate of protein for a lot of nutritional foods, and also butter. So I think you'll see it's going to be like a 70-30 in terms of 70% of what's made is the dehydrated milk powder, and the rest is butter, and butter distributed mostly domestically, and the nutritional food powder is going to be exported, at least about 50% of it. So it's a great project, 200 on-site jobs. Their estimated hourly wage is going to be average is $26.38 an hour. And then we expect a lot of direct, indirect, and induced jobs as a result of this project. Since Darigold's a co-op, it's a member-owned co-op, and that those members are dairymen. And the dairy process producers are expecting some growth. We're hearing that based on their forecast, about 350 new jobs just in the on-site dairy operations, many of those coming inside of Franklin County, and then about 500 additional jobs in the support services that Darigold's going to need. So it's a great project. It's going to be something that brings a great future investment to Franklin County and the city of Pasco and the port and all of our junior taxing districts. When you think about the impacts of property and personal property tax revenues, I mean, you're going to have a significant bump when this project is completed and comes online, and that goes to how do we make our community sustainable and able to continue to develop the infrastructure and the services that we need for our residents.
That's great. It's been a real pleasure working with the whole Port of Pasco, City of Pasco, Franklin County team, and Franklin PUD as well. But the Darigold team, like you talked about, they're a really great company, and such a great, I think, cultural fit with our community, because we really have this agricultural base and these agricultural roots. And like you said, Stephen, all of their owners of the company are dairy farmers. And so that culture really comes through in the dealings that we've all had corporately with them. And just a great, looking forward to having them as part of our corporate community, because they really do a good job for sure.
And they're very upfront about wanting to be involved as a good neighbor and a good member of the community. I think they're already asking us for lists of entities and organizations they need to know about. So I think you're going to be a great member of the family as we go forward.
Yeah. definitely. I do want to, anybody watching this on Zoom, if you have any questions while we're going through our conversation today, you can ask them. We use the question and answer feature on Zoom, but if you're on Facebook, you can ask your questions in the comment section, and then we'll do our best to get to all the questions that we have. Let's go to Mike, and I'm just, because I'll just give a general overview of how we work on these projects, but until there's a disclosure, we have a project name, right? So Project Darigold was Project Ruby, I think, originally, and then it was Project Nutrition and that. And so on these other ones, if it's been disclosed, like say in the Journal of Business or in the Herald, y'all go ahead and use their name, even though we might be working through some other processes. But I was just thinking of the two editions ago, I think it was, in Journal of Business, they talked about a disclosure that had been made because of a sale agreement about Local Bounti, which was Project Sunshine before that. But I know, Mike, you've helped them and facilitated a lot of conversations at the city. You want to give us an overview of Project Sunshine or Local Bounti?
Yeah, it's interesting. With Local Bounti here at the city, talking to my boss, Rick White, they really weren't on the radar. And, they sort of came out of nowhere, if you will, when you sent their request for some information, so they came in, purchased land, and I would say you guys really did a great job of shepherding them through the process. And then what I was able to do with them is communicate with them on some of the energy issues, connect them with Franklin PUD, some of those minutia items, how we set up outreach to the media, and look at future ways that we can collaborate, maybe on workforce development. So they're a pretty complex company and pretty sophisticated. So it was interesting, working with corporations like that, how they do so much work on the front end. They make our work pretty easy from a process standpoint. So I'm learning, depending on the type of company, being early on in this process, some will call you out of the blue and say, hey, tell me a little bit about Pasco. And then, to your point, Karl, I mean, our wheelhouse is really ag, and you can see sort of the next phase of ag is really this technological advancement, especially with some of the indoor greenhouses that can produce vegetables and have them on site same day. So I think you're going to see this transformation process where, you have the Darigolds coming in with incredible technology, a company like Local Bounti that's taking things to the next level with indoor ag, and then, leveraging what we already have. So for me, again, through that kind of journalist lens, looking to see what's out there, learning about the process, and then, developing the structures here at the city of how we can help them. So I think, and, that's something I'm learning too, where I came into the city of Pasco thinking that some of these processes, and Steve and I were talking about this yesterday, where maybe I thought it was going to be more sophisticated, but, really, and I think sometimes people do that a lot in their business. Maybe you overthink things as to, how are people successful and how are we doing this? A lot of the things have come to the city of Pasco without really a recruitment process. But I think we're recognizing that ultimately we're going to have to come up with a strategy to not only retain businesses, but, to start to recruit them as well.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's a really great point. On Local Bounti, I might just add, we met with them this week as well. Really, really good company, kind of a startup, but they're actually on the track to go public. They've got some pretty large equity investments, and they've got some actually major agricultural companies that own what they're working on. And, their model is basically indoor agriculture for like leafy greens, salad type leafy greens and some herb products. And the model is that they want to harvest these hydroponically, semi-robotically grown indoor greens and wash them and package them, literally have them on the shelf of a grocery store in like Seattle or Portland when they'll pull out of Pasco that same day. So it's literally, and they are very carbon conscious and very green, in that part of their model is being closer to the markets. They feel like they reduce their carbon footprint because there's not as long a truck haul, which also helps them on transportation and so many other ways too. And I think, like you said, the level of automation that Darigold will bring into their plant, some of the advances that companies like Lamb Weston and some of our other great food manufacturers here locally have brought into their processes show that the level of automation and then also the skill set of the people that they bring to work is different than what we might traditionally think of as a job in food manufacturing and ag manufacturing. So it's cool to have such great companies that are choosing Pasco because it gives us that kind of like the nucleus to grow that next level of like ag tech here, and then work with our companies we've got that are really good partners and employers. How can they learn from other companies, or how can they increase their efficiency and lower the cost and all the things that some of those technologies bring into the industry for sure.
Pretty incredible. I feel like Local Bounti could be a game changer in the sense of you look at a company like that and where ag is going and ultimately what it's going to be. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that how that breaks out.
No, for sure. Well, let's get, there's so many projects to talk about. Let's keep on moving through them. Stephen, and again, because it's been disclosed, but Reesers, as we know, is purchased some property from Port of Pasco and then is working on that. So you want to give us an overview of what Reesers has going on,
Sure.
Stephen?
So that was a really good example of an existing food processing operation that has a relationship with the Port of Pasco because they're at the Pasco Processing Center already. And they were considering an expansion, actually doing a site selection process in the Midwest. And they came to a conclusion last December that, hey, the commodity that we need for our finished products is grown here in this region. And there's a great workforce and we have a great relationship. And so they reached out to the port, and then we worked together with them to identify a piece of ground pretty darn close to where their existing plant is, just the other side of US 395 at Foster Wells and Capitol Avenue. We were able to jointly make a land acquisition, and they had a very aggressive timeline as evidenced by a substantial amount of earth moving that's been going on for the last couple of weeks. I think we figured in our numbers, Karl, that between the existing plant and the new plant, once everything is built and retrofitted and brought online, there's as much as a net job creation of about 200 food processing jobs there. So it's another fabulous win and a really good demonstration by a company that doing business in the Tri-Cities is a great thing. So I'm pretty excited to see that dirt moving and a lot of conversations around what may come next. So gives us 54 acres of ground to market that's in the city limits already, has city services to it. So that's pretty prime.
No, that's a good point. I think, Stephen, when we've talked to him, the thing that sticks in my mind when they were going through that process of maybe looking to the Midwest, and again, they would, if they did that, they'd source like potatoes as a main ingredient, more locally, because anytime in egg processing or any secondary manufacturing, you always want to haul your raw product the shortest distance because essentially it costs you the most money. So, but when they talked to us about that final decision, to your point, they said one of the deciding factors was the workforce that they had in Pasco, and in Tri-Cities. They said out of all their locations, and they have locations internationally, even I want to say they're down in Mexico, and Reesers is I think they're privately held, but I want to say on their website I read they're over $1 billion in gross revenue. So I mean they're a large company. They said Pasco is their best location for workforce. They said they had didn't have issues with showing up on time. People worked hard, low turnover rates, and they said that workforce was actually one of the major reasons that they decided to make the acquisition from the port and go forward. And so I think it's a really strong reflection on our community, on the workforce that we have, and the reason that a lot of companies are making this choice to come to Pasco for sure. I think let's before we get into the giant in the room that was actually announced yesterday, I want to talk a little bit about, I think both, Stephen, you just talked about being in the city limits and having city services, but like on Darigold, I know that was such a huge part of their decision process was actually, for these plants that we're talking about, where do they get their water? What type of energy inputs do they need? Obviously, the electrical load, like you talked about, Mike, Franklin PUD really came to the table. But then also for Darigold, access to natural gas, and where do you get that from? But then also on the wastewater side, and City of Pasco, has had this cooperative water pretreatment facility that a number of food processing facilities have participated in for a long time. And I think that there was a really unique opportunity with Darigold and kind of what was coming out of the washing processes in their plants. We're not talking about, something that needs a lot of treatment, but essentially it's a lot of the process that they use in their food production, sanitary process to clean it.
There's a lot of water in milk. So when you go through that dehydration process, you create something called cow water. And it took us a while for us to understand what that was. It's condensate of whey. And the great part is that they're going to do about 1.5 to 1.6 million gallons of wastewater a day. About 800,000 gallons of that will be condensate of whey. And that water is very clean. And in fact, that water is going to go to the city's processed water reuse facility, and it will come in cleaner than the water that they currently have to use from an irrigation well to blend with the other processors' food processing water. So it actually is going to be beneficial to that overall system. It's much lower in nitrogen. It's very clean. So it's actually going to be healthy for that processed water reuse facility. Not very often that you get those kinds of, wins.
Yeah, definitely. But that, I know and Mike, I think a lot of these discussions were before you came on board, but I know you've been involved in them since then. But the city's infrastructure, the water reuse facility, and then just water, wastewater. It's such a critical part of these companies' decision.
It's huge. Karl, it's interesting. I just took a tour with our public works director, Steve Worley, to get more of an understanding of the reuse facility. So, for people that don't understand what that is, may not be familiar. So we, as the city of Pasco, have these giant ponds filled with water. I would say there's probably 5, Stephen, and we actually need to expand those. So this water comes from the facilities from Big Pasco. The water is essentially cleaned in our reuse facility. And then I thought the most interesting part is that water is utilized on crop circles that we lease out to farmers. So the water just doesn't disappear, it's actually utilized. And so we're able to lease out that land and actually make it productive with that water. From what I understand, and Stephen would probably know better than me, as we try to expand that reuse infrastructure, those manufacturers are really going to put in a lot of money to make that expand. So, that's something that they're committed to. But I think it goes back to the relationships of what I'm learning. We work so well with the manufacturers, and the port is such a great conduit with them, and the relationships that we have, in our public works department. Because if you're not talking to one another, I mean, it couldn't be as successful. And with Tridec being in the process with your team, so I think that's the biggest takeaway that I've seen in my almost 4 months here, is just how cohesively that we have to work together. And then when you look at the infrastructure that it takes, but there's certainly a commitment from our city council, from county commissioners, from these manufacturing partners to make us what is arguably probably the greatest ag manufacturing sector in the Pacific Northwest. So it's definitely partnerships that make it happen.
Yeah, again, we're all singing from the same sheet of music, but I will say, and we've all come from different places here to Pasco and the Tri-Cities, and I'll just say, like, every community that you're in, I've not experienced the level of cooperation and those relationships that you're talking about, and like the willingness to get stuff done, and where you guys both work for public agencies, and I was in a public agency for a couple of years a long time ago, but you don't always get that can do, or how do we get to yes attitude in the public sector. It doesn't happen all the time, but I'm just blown away by, what you guys are able to do and really have that attitude. Like, we need to fix this for our partners, for the businesses that are locating here or already here. How do we make this work? And that attitude is really refreshing. And I think, again, it's a reason why these big projects are coming to Pasco and to the Tri-Cities, because you've got that attitude. You want to get stuff done, and it shows in the results. It's just it's a good situation to have. Yeah. All right. We've talked about Darigold. We've talked about Local Bounti. We've talked about Reeser's really, really great projects. But then yesterday we finally got the final word that these projects that have been going on for a while, Project Pearl and Project Oyster, now are officially Amazon. So I don't know, Mike, I think you might know a little bit more than the rest of us, or you want to kick us off on that discussion? Just like, what's this project about? What's going to go on there, and what's it look like?
So it's really exciting, Karl, to finally be able to announce it. So it's kind of been a big rumor throughout the market and the state. Is Amazon coming? Is Amazon coming? So we couldn't really say anything. So we've been in discussions with Amazon how they're going to launch the announcement the past couple of months. So here's some of the rundown of logistics. It's 1 million square foot warehouses, essentially, and fulfillment centers. You're going to have one on the east side of South Road 40 East. So essentially, this is the area of land market is Tierra Vita and that kind of neck of the woods off A Street, and it's South 40 Road East. So you're going to have 1 million square foot facility on the east side of Road 40 East, and then you're going to have 1 million square foot facility on the west side. So they're going to both be what they call their extra large bulky fulfillment centers. One's going to do the east side's going to basically work with smaller items, TVs, computers, things like that. The west side facility will handle larger bulky items. We're talking TVs, couches, kayaks, weight sets, things that are a little bit larger. Both facilities will have 750 employees each, so you're talking 1,500 employees. So that's really significant. Salaries will be anywhere from $18 all the way up to $22, $23 an hour. And talking with their folks, I think the really great thing about Amazon is you get benefits on day one. You get a 401k match at 50% right at day one. The educational opportunities are really good with Amazon. So that's the thing I've been most impressed with, talking with their personnel, is they really believe in something called upscaling. They want their employees to get better skill sets throughout the process. And the other thing that they'll do, they'll pay 95% of your tuition without a reimbursement process. I sound like a pitch man for Amazon, but really, I mean, some of the incentives that they have to become an employee with them are really good, and they also encourage people to get a degree outside that skill set. So if you don't want to work in their facility any longer, they'll pay for your education to be a nurse, to get a degree outside that field. So, I mean, they really believe in that upscale process. So, sometimes you hear negative things about Amazon. They're a massive company, and they're going to take their shots, certainly. But when you really look at some of the numbers, and 80,000 employees across the state of Washington, so you think about what they do to our GDP and the infrastructure and the jobs they're providing. So, and then the construction jobs that are going on, man, the earth is moving out there, and there's 100 construction workers out there working. So you think about what they bring to the table and what that's going to mean to Pasco and Tri-Cities in general. And I think it's just really exciting.
Yeah, it's great just to officially know. And I think, we talked about it before, but Tridec, I know, worked with Amazon somewhere around 10 years ago to bring in a call center at that time. And I think during that era of like economic development, call centers were kind of growing as an industry and stuff. And a lot of communities were competing for call centers and that. And so we worked with them on that because it was a really competitive selection process where they picked location in Kennewick at that time. But on this one, we weren't involved in it. I think part of it is that I assume, I mean, we'll have a chance to engage with them, but it's sort of like when they make a logistics or warehousing decision, they've got probably their own models and their own, maps. And obviously a company the size of Amazon does this on a pretty regular basis. And so they probably had a lot tighter window. It's not like, okay, we could either be in Pasco or Olympia. It's like they knew where their customers are. They knew where it was and made that decision to go to Pasco. But I think we're all looking forward to engaging with them and see what they can bring to the table, because like I said, a company that's based here in Washington that does have this presence, are there other, things that they might be able to bring to the table, either in jobs or even in kind of their approach to the community? Like you talked about the upskilling, which is a great program, great, might be a great chance for not only their employees, but maybe other things that we could bring, to the broader community or something.
Yeah,
that's great.
I've been engaging with their folks, and I think the next step in the process is when they really start doing those job recruitments and really get that messaging out. So I'm sure all of us, in this room will be a part of that, because that's going to be a challenge, especially in this environment. You've got a lot of jobs to fill, and we've got a lot of jobs on the table. So that, that sometimes keeps me up at night, Karl, thinking,
Yeah.
Are we gonna have the workforce in place? And I'm a guy that when things are announced, I like to read comments, and I'll go through it. It's my old news brain, and I kind of gauge like the public sentiment. So you hear things like, "Oh, that's great, I'm signing up for a job ASAP," and then the next comment's like, "Yeah, good luck finding a workforce." The next one's, "People don't want to work at this point." So I think it's really up to us collectively to come up with a strategy with Amazon, to make sure that we have that workforce in place and we put our best foot forward.
Yeah, if I could jump in there, Mike,
Yeah.
with you on this. The interesting thing, Karl, is that all of this is happening in a global pandemic. And with some of the strangest, surrealist circumstances. And I think for all three of us and a lot of our partners, just a rough pencil, I think we're looking at upward of 2,000 new jobs coming into Franklin County alone, based on the project announcements that we know about. I think we're all going to become collectively workforce marketers. I think we're going to be talking about, hey, if you're looking for a good job and you're not already in Tri-Cities, come here. And here's the things that we're working on to make sure that housing's available for everyone. And because they are hand in hand with each other. So it's going to be an exciting couple of years as these projects build.
Yeah, I was going to ask Stephen, you talked about research that both you and Mike, have used with your journalistic backgrounds, and maybe for both you guys, have you even had a chance to look at examples of when Amazon comes to a community, with this kind of a scale project? How does the community address workforce? How do they address even workforce housing and stuff like that? I haven't had a chance to do that. I know that we've had conversations, and I think it's also part of your job. Great point, Stephen. Like talent, we talked about infrastructure, we talked about location, we talked about these other reasons that workforce, that these companies have made the decision to come to Pasco and the Tri-Cities. It's part of our job to stay ahead of those issues, so that make sure that the reasons that, like the equation, the variables in the equation, the reason the company came here or decided to grow here, that we stay ahead of them and keep on going that way. But if you guys had a chance to look at, maybe some other examples of communities when this scale of project comes on board.
So being from Adams County and Ritzville, when Amazon announced in Airway Heights up near Spokane, they built a facility there that's somewhere around 2.5 million square feet and brought in more than 1,000 employees right out of the gate. And the city of Spokane, the West Plains Chamber of Commerce, and a number of other entities all got together, Greater Spokane Incorporated, and there was a $500,000 marketing campaign developed for the west side of the state that talked about all the great jobs coming to that area and the great quality of life. And I think we need to maybe look at what is our version of something like that, and really try to answer the important questions, but also tout the fact. You just got high praise for your 2020 fact sheet and a site selection discussion we were doing because of how much data is in there, and the fact that right out there out front, you're talking about the great quality of life here in the Tri-Cities. And I think we have to sell that and sell it very well, passionately so.
I echo those sentiments too. I'm familiar with how that was rolled out as well. And I'm 100% with Stephen. I think a lot of times decisions either to move here or to work a certain place, it's not necessarily the job, it's what are the amenities and, what's the quality of life. So I think that's something that both Stephen and I, with our skill set to, communicate with people, that's the thing that I look at in the rollout process is, okay, what are the assets of the Tri-Cities? Why would you want to be a part of this community? And then I think the other important part is what does working for this company bring to you? And Amazon has something to sell because, maybe the salaries aren't that high when you initially start, but some of the other things that they bring to the table, from educational opportunities to upscaling to benefits, which are huge, especially on day one. How many times have I talked to people that, I don't get benefits until 90 days and, through my probation period, but Amazon will start those on day one. And we all know how expensive, healthcare could be. So I think it's some of those intangibles, but I certainly think we do need a game plan, because we can't just expect, Amazon's going to show up and everybody's going to flock here, for an $18 an hour job to $23 an hour job, because, that's still a challenge for a lot of people, because it opens up Pandora's box to so many questions that we're dealing with, which is affordability. And Stephen and I were a part of, I think it was your forum actually, and it's not necessarily affordable housing. And I thought Stephen used just a key word. What was it? Attainable housing?
Attainable.
It's really attainable housing. And I think that's what we're dealing with. And again, that's what keeps me up at night as an economic development manager is, you have all these jobs. Where are people going to live? Do they have attainable housing, like Stephen says? And, how do you get there? So, I think that these are all the challenges we have as economic development people.
Yeah, and I'll just say, these are good problems to have.
Right. They are. Good.
But I think that's why, to both your points, that it's so important that we have these discussions and that we bring the community and our partners together, and that we have to stay ahead of these things, because our job is economic growth, job creation, great successes, great projects coming down the pike. We got to make sure that we stay ahead of that. And these issues, workforce housing, the other things that'll come along with it, infrastructure and those other things. We got to keep a lot of plates in the air, but that's really what our job's about, because it's not, when we do our job to keep a company here, to help somebody grow, to bring a new company in, we've got to bring everything to bear. And I like both of your guys' perspective, with the journalist in mind, and doing that research and learning about stuff. Because I think in our job in economic development, that's what we got to do, right? You can't just be the flash in the pan, hey, come here because it's great. And then when a company gets here, everything
right.
falls flat. You got to be on the job and keep it going, keep building that relationship, but then maintaining the relationship after the announcement's made and after the project opens and after, it's really just a welcoming companies to the community and helping them grow. Really, that it's pretty multifaceted.
I think it goes right, to the training, doesn't it, Karl? So when you think about, we're doing business attraction all the time, because that's the part that's glamorous, is getting to see that headline or that news broadcast announcing an Amazon or a Darigold. But we have an obligation to those companies to help them get through all of their hurdles as they develop, And then we need to stay in touch. And that brings us to the business retention piece, whereas economic developers, we need to check in on our friends, our new friends, as they move through their life cycle here, because they're going to be here for a really long time. And the nature of Murphy's Law means they're going to face different challenges at different points in their history here. And economic developers have a bit of an obligation to stay in touch and, hey, how are things going? Do you need any advocacy? Do you need any help? And we've seen economic developers of all types, small, medium, and large, during the pandemic in Washington State, really step up to help get grant money to companies, small startups, and sole owner proprietorships. And we've actually helped a couple of our tenants at Big Pasco apply for grant funds flowing through the Pasco Chamber of Commerce. And so it's a really good reminder that this is a long game. It's not a short one.
Exactly.
That's so interesting that you mentioned that, Stephen, because I was just thinking about that the other day. How, as a journalist, you're always following up with people to make sure, hey, anything new, how's it going? And I find myself doing that same thing, especially one of my focus areas is downtown, and really working to develop some of those businesses and get the grant money that Stephen's talking about to a lot of these businesses that have been hurting. But I find myself always following up, how's it going? Where are we in the process? Can I help you? And I don't think a lot of people have had that at the city of Pasco, sort of a conduit. So sometimes there's a level of surprise there, like, oh, you're helping me and you're following up. So, but I think that's, to Stephen's point, so important, is just letting people know that we're here to help them, because it's so easy to kind of move on to the next thing, right? And but I think that's something that I'm probably more conscious of, just because of my training as a journalist. You're always kind of following up with your contacts, just to see what's popping, or is there a good story, or just to say hi. So I think that those little things are really important in economic development, because you never know, you're going to get a nugget. And I've already had that in my 4 months where I thought everything was copacetic, and then there's another issue that's coming up. As small as parking. People are parking in front of my business, and that's some of the things that it's amazing, Karl, that how the small things can fester and you don't take care of them. So I find myself constantly following up.
No, there's no doubt. I think I probably told the story before, but I remember having a conversation a couple of years back with a peer in economic development, and they asked, what do you think the difference is between economic development and community development? And I think I had a pretty simple answer, that this is a bigger market and community than I've lived in before, but I think the answer is still the same no matter your size. And I just said, I think they're really almost one and the same, because if you don't have a community that people want to live and work in, you can't go and sell it. You can't retain them and help them expand. I mean, they're really the same. And some people have a job. I'm a community developer. I'm an economic developer. But I think, really we wear all those hats, because essentially we're a part of the community. We believe in our community, and we're trying to sell it and build it and, do all these things at the same time. I think that's a huge, huge crossover for sure.
Yeah, so it's responsible attraction of the right companies that fit our community. It's thinking about how to diversify the companies that you attract and the types of jobs that get created, and thinking about our residents, our workforce, our future workforce, and how can we go get great jobs that give them great opportunities for them to continue to stay in their hometown if they choose to. A lot of people talk about how high school seniors bolt and they go off to college anywhere but here. And in this region, you've got, Columbia Basin College and WSU Tri-Cities. What a great amount of horsepower around post-secondary education. And then you have a wide variety between the two counties of job classifications and pay scales. And so really, not to steal the name from Amazon, but the world is your oyster in the Tri-Cities, right? So you can really do just about anything here. And I know specifically from the Port of Pasco standpoint, we're looking at how we can diversify the industries that we recruit. And we have our eye right now on the airport. as a location for us to maybe go after a whole new industry sector for the Tri-Cities, at least specific to Pasco and the Tri-Cities Airport.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Stephen. It's a great point. For sure. We did have a question that related to the cruise boats that go up and down the river, Stephen. And I don't know if I'm not even sure if this is your area or if Randy would deal with this, but the question is in the Tri-Cities, I think they only dock at Richland. I was actually having lunch this week in Richland and the cruise boat went by and docked at the park. But has there ever been any conversations with like Port of Pasco to maybe open up more docking facilities to, because I know there's more traffic on the river and coming down the river from Lewiston and Clarkston. They did an economic impact study on the boats that go all the way up to Clarkston. And, so I know COVID shut them down for a while, but looks like there's growing traffic there. Is that something that you're able to talk about or answer?
Sure. So before I got here, the port had already commissioned a study, a structural engineering study to look at our wharf dock. We have a large wharf dock that's available to us. It's located between our office at Osprey Point and the Cable Bridge. We're looking at probably about a $4.5 million rehabilitation and redevelopment project, but we already have interest from at least one cruise line. And one of the conversations that Mike and I have been in was with Laura from the U.S. Department of Commerce Economic Development Administration. We're thinking about taking a run at the tourism grant that's coming out through ARPA at EDA to do some of that work on the wharf as a way to initiate tourism where the boat can dock there. They'll bus them to downtown Pasco, and they'll also bus them or allow them to walk to the future Osprey Point development, including its marketplace. And so I think that is a necessary thing. And there's also a growing conversation around water taxes from one side of the river to the other. And
that's awesome.
I know that's happened before, but I think there's going to be a real drive from the Osprey Point development to make it easy for people to get back and forth across the river.
That'd be so cool. And it just goes to what we're just talking about, right? Like, I just think the concept of a water taxi, not only could it be a transportation hub, it could be a real tourism draw and just to add to the amenities in our economy, right? Like, I know the port's going to build out or wants to build out maybe kind of a public market, either at Osprey Point or at that wharf facility and stuff. And, if you could get on a water taxi like Clover Island or something, come across, that would be so cool. So the three of us could probably talk for a couple hours, but we're at the end of our 1 hour.
Wow. So
yeah, no, I really did. But I really appreciate the partnership that we have with both of you guys and with the entities that you represent. And, I've said it before, but such a great partnership. And there's a reason that these announcements are coming down the pike. And it's because of the job that you guys do and your teams do, and the city of Pasco, Port of Pasco, Franklin County, Franklin PUD, all of the infrastructure providers. It's really a team effort. But Mike, you want to kick us off with maybe some closing comments?
Yeah, Karl, to echo your sentiments, I think they're just great partnerships from your team, Tracy, you in particular. My short 4 months, I can really see what a collaborative effort it is to make all these projects come to fruition and come to the Tri-Cities. So for me, it's been eye-opening, educational. It's been so enjoyable too. I've honestly never loved a job so much, to come to work and really try to make an impact every single day and to get to work with guys like Stephen and the folks at the port and, our partners at the other cities as well, that we all interface with. It's just so nice that every day seems like you're all pulling on the same rope and it's a team effort. So, if anybody wants to contact me, feel free to reach out to me. My cell phone's 509-850-4748. Gonzalez M at pasco-wa.gov. Would love to hear from everybody. And again, just appreciate shows like this, Karl, and everything that you guys are doing, because you're really doing an amazing job. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mike. We really appreciate your time today and just the job that you're doing and a lot more good projects and good things to come. Stephen, some closing remarks for us, and thanks for your time, Stephen. I got to say, like you, it's just both you and Mike, but really your background in economic development in Adams County and having such a great track record of working in that community, you really bring a lot of experience down here. It's great having you on the team.
Starting to make me feel like the older guy, even though I know it's not true. Hey, one thing that really drives successful economic development is feedback. And when I was a small town newspaper publisher, you didn't go to the restaurant or the grocery store or the gas station without someone talking to you about something that was in the paper or something that should be in the paper. And when it comes to what we're all doing here, we want to hear public feedback. We want to hear your ideas. If you travel somewhere and you see a business or an industry, a company, whether it's commercial or hospitality or manufacturing, we want to know. One of us will have maybe the opportunity to help bring that company here, whether it's, Tridec is a great, host, or us on the industrial side, or even on retail, commercial, and hospitality. And Mike and I are already having a conversation about, recruiting additional brands for the city. So, please reach out, and I'm available at the Port of Pasco at 509-547-3378. And the email address is smcfadden@portofpasco.org.
I was on mute, sorry. Thank you, Stephen. And I do have to say, you guys are awesome, because it's the first time anybody's given their phone number and emails. It's great, man. We're setting a new.
We're setting the bar.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm thinking every time that Mike and I get together, one of us is trying to figure out how to raise the bar on the other.
He likes to kid me about my suits. Steven's always like, I've got all these old news suits that are like, come out of the closet. We haven't been worn in years.
See, Mike, you have more suits than the Miami Vice guys.
I do, man. And the great thing is I'm from Miami, so I love wearing pastel. These.
Exactly.
Don Johnson right here, man. It's my hero.
That's awesome.
Sharp. Well, I'm always pushing you out in front of the crowd for that public stuff.
Next time we meet, maybe he'll have his sleeves rolled up, Don Johnson.
Hey, man.
All right, we're way over time, guys. I really appreciate your time. Great discussion,
right,
great partnerships.
Absolutely.
Yep. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good weekend.